for 6 count. Okay, you can put that down, and you can begin anytime you like. You can say your name if you like, and you can put that away. You don't have to mess with that. You can just put it on the floor in front of you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. My name is Vera Federman, and I was born in Debrecen, Hungary, where I grew up and went to school, and went to Jewish elementary school. And then from there, my dad decided I should go to a gymnasium. There was no Jewish girls' gymnasium, so I went to a Protestant gymnasium from which I graduated, and that was in 1942. And 2 years later, in 1944, Hungary was the last country in Europe that was occupied by Nazi Germany. And at first, we were thinking that they only came in because the Soviet armies were very close to the Hungarian border, and that we were not its objects, the Jews. There were about 800,000 Jews in Hungary at the time, and the Hungarian government was not really of the same horrible caliber as the Nazi government. In fact, in 1943, the Miklos Kállai, who was the prime minister, tried to have some secret meetings with the Allies to see how they can extricate themselves out of the war. But Hitler got wind of it, and that's how we found that out much later. That's how the occupation took place on March 19th, 1944. And as I said, at first we didn't expect anything really bad because we never heard as to what happened to the Jews of Poland or France or Russia. We didn't. That was big secrecy. But in a very few days, we found out that something is beginning. And by April 5th of 44, we had to wear the yellow star. We couldn't go out on the street without affixing it on an outer garment. And not more than 2 weeks later, there was feverish activity to set up a ghetto and put a brick wall around it. And in May sometimes in May, we were ordered to move in there and leave all of our possessions behind, with the exception of a few things, a bed or this or that. And we were in the ghetto, another perhaps few weeks. And one day, German trucks showed up, and they ordered the people into the trucks. And then they took us outside the city to a brick factory that was located at a single railroad track. We, of course, still didn't know what was going to happen to us. And we were there for quite a long time. I would say a good 3 weeks, because we found out about the Normandy invasion there. And our hopes were just, we thought, we maybe not have to go wherever they were going to take us. Well, the first transport left, and my father was very, very against being on it. The second transport left, about 40 or 45 wagons, these animal wagons, cattle cars. And of course, the third one, we had to go on the third one. And whatever little possessions we had, we went there, we started going up, and then my father saw that it was covered with animal litter and was smelly and bad. So he decided to start to clean it up, which he did. And an older sister of a friend of mine, Zsuzsi, who had worked in the Jewish hospital in Budapest, was a very clever girl. She was already a widow, which I'm not going to go into it. And my father looked at her and says, "Juji, watch out for my little girl." Now, I don't know what my father knew or what he didn't know, but that's what he told her. So we were in the cattle car, and we didn't know where, of course, at all where we were going. And there were quite a few Polish Jews on there who had escaped Poland to Hungary, and they had false papers, but they were caught, and they were there. And when they noticed that we were going north, possibly towards the Polish border, they slit their wrists. And blood was just gushing all over the place. And everybody was crying, "Is there a doctor, a doctor?" And there was one doctor with his wife. He was a man probably in his 50s or close to 60. And it seemed like they have both lost their mind, because he was whispering very sweetly to his wife, saying, "Darling, we're going to arrive to Venice pretty soon." So the train crossed the Polish border, and at the end of 3 days, I turned 20 on the cattle car. And at the end of 3 days or so, we arrived somewhere at dawn. And we looked out and we saw lights, you know, and we were on there for several hours. Finally, they opened the doors and they told us to get down. And I looked across and I saw a group of men who were being beaten by sticks, you know, around their heads and shoulders. And I said to my dad, "Please, Dad, let me kiss you goodbye now." And I didn't want to see him beaten. And I said, "I will see you later." And he disappeared, you know, across. And my mother and I followed the women's line that was going in a direction. And we stopped at a German guard, some officer or something. And without a word, you know, he pointed my mother to the left and me to the right. Well, you know, I had no idea what's on the left or what's on the right, but I didn't want my mother to go somewhere where I couldn't go with her. I didn't want her to be alone. So I said very quickly, and I spoke good German, I said, "Please, I want to go with my mother. I'm only 13 years old." Without even knowing that 13 and 14 was the age where they certainly went there with their mothers. But he shook his head. Well, he didn't even shake his head, just pointed at me. And I went and I saw other young girls, and everybody was sobbing. And we went in front of what later turned out to be a bathhouse, and we waited there for hours. And finally we went in, and they told us to drop our clothing on the floor. And there was a shower for about a few seconds, and then they threw some ragged clothing to us. And that was the first day in Auschwitz. And they took us to, this group, I actually got to go with my friends Vera and Susie, who was told by my father to look out for me. I was with her. And we went into a barrack. She found out was like Barrack 7. And Barrack 6 was a hospital barrack. It was called, I don't know, in German it was a hospital barrack, but it wasn't a barrack where people were taken care of, because they didn't even have an aspirin there. But women came down with horrible diarrheas, and they were put in there, and they either survived or they didn't, and then they were sent to the gas chambers. And the food was so bad, you know, we couldn't eat it. We actually threw it down. It was so bad. In the morning we had some black liquid, we drank that, and then for lunch there was some kind of soup that I said we threw away. And at dinner time there was sawdust-filled bread that was distributed for 5 people, and then with a piece of margarine. And that was our daily quota of food. You know, pretty soon everybody was sick and with diarrhea, and you couldn't go into the, oh, by the way, there were no latrines even at all. There were buckets between the barracks, and you had to relieve yourself that way. And pretty soon there was a horrible outbreak of scarlet fever. And we saw the girls, and I didn't catch it, but many of them did. And they took them in this building that was supposed to be the hospital building. And then, a day or two later, we were watching them, and the trucks pulled out, and the girls were chased naked already up on the trucks. And it was like sardines, one on top of the other. And I still didn't believe it. But then, you know, they were taking them to the gas chambers. And this went on, and we were there about 6 weeks then. And one night, you know, the Stubendienst, somebody who takes care of the rooms there, I mean, some kind of a title, we heard German crying, children crying in the next Lager, which was very close to us actually. And they were crying in German, Vater, Mutter, wo gehst du? Where are you going? And the student, he said, sit up and maybe it'll be our turn next. So next morning we found out that 4,200 German gypsies were gassed and cremated that night. And then the next day or two, they chose a barrack into a infectious disease barrack. They didn't kill the girls who had scarlet fever, but put them in there. And my cousin, Sidney's wife, came up with scarlet fever, and that's where she was taken. And everybody always asked for Susie for help. And she was crying, Susie, Susie, Zsuzsi actually, that was her Hungarian name. Send me some water, I'm dying. And Susie found some kind of a broken vessel, and she actually sent her some water. Well, in a few days, I don't know, maybe, they were beginning to take women somewhere to go to work. And quite a few transports were gone because we didn't know where. And one day they lined us up, you know, and we had to go past Mengele naked with our shoes in our hand. And my Susie and her sister looked to be twins to him. And he was examining them, making them raise their arms, and when were you born, this, you know, all that. And well, I'm a little bit ahead of myself because I came first, and he said to me, you won't do, you're too thin. Go that way, which was left. And I didn't go all the way there. I was watching Susie and her sister, what was going to happen. And he let them go, you know, to the line where it was a good line. And then I came back, and he said to me, I already told you, you're too thin, you won't do. Get out, get out. And I said, oh, but I spoke German very well. I said, but I am very strong, which was kind of ridiculous to say. I said, I'm very strong and I can work, go. And then a German woman was standing next to him. She was a guard. To me, you know, to everybody, she looked like a goddess because she had beautiful hair, all our hair was gone. You know, they shaved our heads and our whole bodies. And she was there, and she leaned to him, and she said, "Last decline again." And he did. He did. And I joined that group. And during the night, there was a huge building, and everybody thought that it was that it was a gas chamber, but I don't know. And they were still going around, and women who were just too thin or just too what, so they were eliminated. And I was afraid that they would eliminate me, but no. Next day, they gave us some bread and jam or butter, not butter, but margarine, and they loaded us up into an open cattle car. There were 1,000 young girls in there, and Susie and Vera and I were just like this together. And we traveled for 3 days and 3 nights, and we arrived into Western Germany. And we got off the train, and they made us walk through the woods. It was dark, and I was scared. And I said to Susie's sister, where do you suppose they're taking us? Are they going to kill us here? And she says, "Don't be silly. They could have killed you in Auschwitz." It's not funny. So we walked, and after a few miles, we arrived to a camp. And we found out, I mean, I don't know if it was that time or a little later, that it was emptied of French prisoners of war. So it was more like a normal camp, you know. And as we got into the entrance, all this huge crowd of women, Susie says, you wait right here, girls, and I'm going to go and see if we can go work in the kitchen. And we said, "Please don't go, don't leave us now, please, just stay right here. This is a crazy thought. Don't worry, just stay." So she left, and about half an hour, maybe 20 minutes later, she comes back and she says, "Well, we're going to be Kartoffelschälerins, potato peelers." I mean, this was something. I mean, really. And by God, you know, she took care of us, because her father, my father that is, asked her to take care of my little girl. And there was a special barrack for the Kartoffelschälerin, and the potato peeling room was off there. And actually, I mean, we were still sick with diarrhea, and night in and night out, you know, there was a pilgrimage there was actually a place to go, kind of a decent place, to go to the bathroom, and nobody bothered us. So we were in the Kartoffelschälerin kitchen, and Susie gave each of us 2 or 3 potatoes a day, and we looked pretty good pretty quickly. And unfortunately, I was thrown out of the kitchen. A German Auxiliary came in and said, "Du starke Junge, heraus," which means, "You strong youth, out." So I went in the, it was a munitions factory. It was a munitions factory, and the job was, there were little railroad tracks and little trains, you know, and you had to take off it was still smoldering hot. They were filling something with explosives. And I was doing that. It was bloody job for 12 hours. And pretty soon I got lucky. I was transferred. I was transferred to a place where they had these big mine, something from the sea that they were recycling, copper and whatever. So I had a chisel and to take apart this, what is it? What was it? Anyway, we recycled the copper from it. And this was done, also for 12 hours a day. And the Aufseherin who was watching us said to a girl next to me, he says, I'm putting you in charge. I have to leave for about 15 minutes. You see to it that everybody works. So when she left, I put down the chisel and the hammer, and I folded my arm. And the girl says, I'm in charge now. You go to work. I said, you're crazy. I don't have to work. What are you thinking? So I'm going to tell on you. I said, no, you won't. Well, she did. And the woman out there was shrieking behind me, come in, and Lowe's, and I broke one of my fingers. Wasn't a big deal. But I got to go back to the camp. And they put some on it, some 2 pieces of wood, tied it up. Now this was already pretty quickly at the end of, it was like at the end of February of 45. And by the way, there was a Hauptscharführer there who was the head of the camp, and he was an older man. And he did not lose but one person who was doing some kind of working with a gas mask. So he still had 999 people. And I have to say this, he was a very decent man. The thing is, for many years, how many years now? I'm still wondering, did he see the handwriting on the wall, or was he really decent? I don't know, but he was. So that, what can you say? So one day, they didn't even have sidecars or any trucks or anything. One day we come back, I was healed, and I was coming back from the factory, and I see that all kinds of peasant carts are lined up there, and the Hauptscharführer is out there, and he says, well, we're going to go now. So we marched, all night long. It was about 30 kilometers, and went through German little towns and villages, and everybody opened the window and looked out and through. And then we even met a German, the German part of the German army, who were singing, the war is over, the war is over, and they were throwing chocolates to us. I never caught one, however. So during the day we didn't march, and the next day we marched more. I remember it was pretty, we used those wooden shoes, and my feet were all bloodied, and frankly, I didn't think we were ever going to get rid of them. I thought we were going to be prisoners forever and ever. So the second night of marching, in the morning, I see the Hauptscharführer coming around and talking to us. And he says, I'm going now, I'm going to leave you here, but if you want to come with us, you can. Anyway, so they left. And we were trying to figure out where to hide because there were other Germans there. One of them even pulled his gun and was going to shoot me, but changed his mind. And we went in the woods to sleep. And it was March, it was very cold and wet. So we came out in the morning and looked, the 1,000 women, split up. Naturally, you don't stay together. And we were like 15 of us together. And we slept in a hay rack and here and there. And finally, next morning, it's clear. There's no Germans. And we were so hungry, we haven't eaten for heaven knows how many days. So we were marching towards a little village, and we arrived there, and 15 of us or so. We knock on the door, and a German woman opens the door, and we say very nicely, "We haven't eaten, could you please give us something to eat?" So she went in, and it was beautiful peasant bread. She cut nice pieces of peasant bread, put some lard on it, and handed it to us. But most of the women, the girls, threw up, went out because it was too heavy. Lard, they couldn't eat. They didn't have that kind of thing. So I didn't, however. I ate it, and I was happy. So the woman has a baby and standing by the window, and she starts muttering, "Ah, die amerikanische Panzerspitze, the American tank corps." And we run to the window, and by God, there are the Americans. So we ran out, and he's happy to see us. He has seen more of us. And he says, "I would like to give you something to eat, but I really only have a few," I don't know what it was. And he threw a few things out. I never caught anything. I was a bad catch. And there we were in this village. It was called Sondheim. And a lot of American troops were going through because the war wasn't over yet. It was end of March. And we slept in a schoolroom. And Susie and I, well, Susie was still very clever. She said, "Why don't we go and see our friends? They must be in some other village." So she goes to the Bürgermeister, that's the mayor, and she says to him, we got to have a horse and a buggy because we got to go to this village." "Okay, can you drive it?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can. My grandfather's farm, I always did." So there is the horse and buggy, and I'm driving. I'm going out to the sort of freeway, and there's the American army coming. And the horse is scared to death, takes off in the fields, and overturns the buggy. And here we are standing. Anyhow. And we met, a man comes over pretty soon, and it was one of the French prisoners of war who was also liberated. And he takes us back in there. So there were American troops going by, and they heard that there were girls here, Jewish girls, that they need some help. So one of them was a Jewish captain, and he went to the Bürgermeister and ordered him to give us the house, the head Nazi's house. We stayed there for quite a while, and then we decided to go back home. Shall I tell you how I got the scholarship?
Sure.
We decided, we were in that house, and then we decided that we want to go back home to Hungary to see who was still alive. Well, it was, you had to wait. We were in Ulm. We waited 3 weeks there, no transportation. We were in many, on the Danube, Ulm and Passau and many other towns. Finally, we get a train, and we go up to Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, to Brno. And he sees all these nice young girls, and he says, he said, "We just got rid of the Germans, and we would like you to establish here in Czechoslovakia." And we said, "But we have to go home and see who is alive." So we left, we left on the train, and we arrived to Budapest. And we get on the streetcar, And we said, the Hungarian conductor says, but you have to pay. I said, well, we just got here. We don't have any money. Yeah, well, everybody just got here and they don't have money. So Susie looks around and sees a couple of Russian officers sitting there. So she goes up there and tries to explain to them. Well, they got up and, very strict face, so we didn't need to pay. Well, we didn't find anybody at home. Everybody was gone. So Susie decided we'll go back to Germany and try to get to the United States. Well, we got some paper, they didn't let you out of the country at that time. Well, we got some papers that we were nurses who are looking for displaced persons who are still left in Germany and Austria. And we had these beautiful papers with photographs, and it was in Russian, in German, in Hungarian. We get on the train, and it's filled with Russian soldiers, and it's dark. And I had a duffel bag filled with clothing, and it's by my feet. And then Susie sits, and we're three of us. And pretty soon I said, Susie, somebody stole my bag. So Susie strikes some matches. She goes around. She finds it, and she's shaking her hand at the man. And honest to God, he was scared of her. We arrived to Vienna, and from Vienna, we decided to go to Germany. But at that time, there were already there was French occupation, British occupation, Russian, and American. And you couldn't go through from American zone. At any rate, we took the train, and the MPs invaded the train and said, where are you going? We're going to Germany. Why, you can't. You're going to Klein. They took us to a camp. Thanks a lot. They took us to a horrid camp, and somebody says we should walk around and see who is in that barrack way back there. So we go to the barrack, and you know who was way back there? They were Nazis. They were German officers, and they locked us up with the same bunch. So some of us who were wasn't me, some of us who were pretty knowledgeable as to what to do, they said, we're going to go on a hunger strike, and we'll see what happens. So we refused the food for about 3 days. And on the fourth day, there was an American already in Linz, was the American Joint Distribution Committee. They were the ones who took those who were liberated and alive and helped them. So this gentleman comes and he says, who can speak English? Can somebody speak English? So I raised my hand. I speak English. He said, oh good, you're hired already. So I was working in the Landhaus, a very fancy place where General, I don't know, Mark Clark's office was. And since I spoke English very well, I could do the correspondence, and pretty soon they transferred me to immigration. Oh, and also we got papers from the Hillel Foundation in Chicago saying that we should find 100 young people who had high school diplomas, and they can find them places at different universities. Well, we couldn't find anything like 100, because if you were a Polish Jew, you never graduated. So we found some Hungarians, and we were transferred to Stuttgart. And for Stuttgart, I found out that I was admitted to the University of Washington. So we took it was the SS Marine Tiger from Bremerhaven, and we arrived to to New York in about 14 days. It was the worst winter in early 1948. We couldn't even see the Statue of Liberty. But my happy life began. I traveled, Marika and I, my cousin and I, both were accepted. And we traveled to University of Washington, where she was in one sorority and I was in the other Jewish sorority.
Did you want to show us those pictures?
Well, I want to show you these. Oh, I want to show these two pictures. One of them is a Jewish elementary school in Debrecen that has about 62 students in it, and the teacher, I remember her as a blessing after. I'm almost 85 years old, but I still remember her as the very best teacher I ever had. I mean, school was just something that we absolutely adored. Everybody learned. And she was our teacher for 4 years, from the first, second, and fourth grades. And then my dad, my father, who was in charge of my education, decided that I should go to this Protestant gymnasium. And that's where I went. And this other picture has my father here. This was in 1941-42, was the New Year's Eve party. And you see the confetti, and I'm here, and all these young people. Most of the boys did not survive. And I can tell you that, and of course our mothers and fathers didn't survive, but 1, 2, 3 girls survived from this group. In fact, of course my cousin and I live on Mercer Island, but this little blonde, she lived in Budapest, and she stayed there. She never went to Auschwitz. She went on the first transport to Vienna, and her whole family survived there.
Okay. Excellent.
Well, everything I say is the absolute truth. When it's good, I'm telling you, and it's bad, I tell you.
Sure.